Is it too early to call The Boys the best comic book show on TV? I know it's only the second season, and it's technically on streaming, not TV, but what the hell? I'm calling it. Guys, I cannot express how refreshing this was. In an era where it seems like every writer, producer, actor, show, movie, whatever is so obsessed with being 100% PC, toeing the right political line, not offending this person or that person, afraid to tackle one subject or another because they might get canceled by a bunch of clowns on social media, here we have The Boys that says F that shit and just gives a giant middle finger to every single one of them. And it's glorious. In fact, in a lot of ways, The Boys feels like the antidote to the woke SJW disease that's been infecting show business in recent times. Because at virtually every turn, it seems to go out of its way to take the exact opposite approach, and the result is a show that feels like one of the most honestly progressive things I've seen all year. Because even though there is a lot of political commentary this season, it's not viewing things through a political lens, if that makes any sense. And this gives the show and the characters a very genuine, authentic quality that you don't necessarily see in a lot of other things right now because the writers aren't afraid to make them feel real. Women can be assholes, black people can be selfish pricks, gay people are not put up on pedestals just for being gay, and if they are, it's so the show can comment on the ridiculousness of that very thing happening in show business so often these days. No one is safe. Everyone is every bit as flawed and imperfect and f***ed up as everyone else. On The Boys, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, gay, straight, male, female, everybody gets a slice of the hot mess pie, and I absolutely love it. And I'm actually kind of stunned that I can say that given the massive amount of political commentary this season had. Let's face it, I think we've all come to expect that kind of stuff to go a certain way when it pops up in our entertainment. And I was worried about that when it started up here, but turns out I didn't need to be. Almost every big issue you can think of right now, they've got something to say about. Racism, sexism, equality, Nazis, the war on terror, school shootings, illegal immigration, Scientology, the friggin' border wall. And what's so amazing about it is that even though it's trying to say something about some pretty sensitive issues, and it's really obvious what the real-life inspiration for this stuff is, I never once felt like I was being preached to. I don't know that the show even takes a stance on these things, really. There was never a moment when I thought the writers were definitely on the left or the right and they were veering into propaganda. There was none of that stuff. The closest they ever really got to one side or the other, as far as I could see, was showing pretty explicitly that Nazis are bad. And I think most of us already knew that. Otherwise, they just presented the issues and used them as fuel to tell an original story. Thank you. That's how this is supposed to work. And it's not just the political stuff that's handled so well either. The way it deals with gender issues is pretty great too. Which brings me to the character that I think a lot of people were nervous about this season, Stormfront. In the comics, this character is a man and a Nazi. In the show, it's a woman. And as soon as that news came out, I could hear alarm bells going off, everybody screaming about how the show was bending the knee to SJW culture, blah blah blah. Well, you can shut the alarm off, because that's not what happened. In fact, I'd say that this new version of Stormfront is one of those rare occasions when gender swapping a character actually made the character better. Believe it or not, there was a lot of thought put into this change. The important stuff about the character is still there. She's still a Nazi. But now that she's a woman, you get this whole new dynamic to play around with, especially when it comes to Homelander. Because Homelander is this giant gaping hole of insecurities, and as a woman, a very powerful and savvy woman who knows how to manipulate social media to her advantage and threatens to usurp Homelander's position as the top dog in the Seven, she's able to really get under his skin in a way that a male character just couldn't. And Homelander's never more interesting than when he's thrown off his game like that, because that's when you get a peek inside his brain and you see the tiny little bits of actual humanity that he still has, as well as the psychotically violent egomaniacal narcissist that's barely contained inside him at the best of times. Homelander is cold, despicable, terrifying, vile, possessive, but not in a one-dimensional way. You do get the sense that maybe he could have turned out better if he'd had half a chance. And every once in a while this season, there'll be a moment where you almost feel bad for him. So not only is Stormfront great, but it's mainly thanks to her that Homelander continues to be the most fascinating character on the show as he takes the next step on his march toward the most epic monster heel run of all time. The only drawback to this is how it impacts some of the other characters. Stormfront is basically the new female lead this season, and she gets a lot of attention, so other characters end up taking more of a back seat, mainly A-Train and the Deep. A-Train isn't hurt that much because even though we see less of him, he's still doing stuff that matters, but the Deep isn't so lucky. He still gets his own story, but it's very disconnected from the main narrative and feels really unimportant as a result. For most of the season, I kept wondering what the point of his story was. The potshots at Scientology were fun and all, but why are we doing this? It actually reminded me a lot of Dorian Gray in Penny Dreadful Season 2. In Season 1, Dorian had a purpose. He had a reason to be a part of the story. But in Season 2, that purpose was gone. Dorian was off doing his own thing, totally separate from everybody else, and suddenly it was like, why the hell are we still following this guy around? That's kind of where we are with the Deep right now. I tried to be patient with his stuff because I assumed it was going somewhere, and it kind of does, but just barely. And it didn't feel worth spending that much time on it. The episode when I was most into the Deep storyline was when he met up with the rest of the main characters again. That's when it was actually working for me. But then he goes back off on his own again, and I kept wanting them to just get to the point with this already. So that was a weakness this season. It seems like they're just keeping the Deep around out of habit right now. I say put him back in the main story or just get rid of this character because it doesn't feel like he has much of a purpose anymore. He's really the only one you can say that about though. The other characters, I think, were serviced quite well. Some of them get more screen time than others, but almost everyone's arc feels like it comes to a head in some way. And because this seems designed to be less like Season 2 and more like the second half of Season 1, the story does too. So we get payoffs for a lot of things that Season 1 set up that I thought we'd have to wait for a lot longer, but we don't. The writers start doling out backstories and revealing secrets the characters had been keeping that makes you think about them differently, and it all builds up to one of the most satisfying and also gut-wrenching season finales I've seen in a while. I mean it, that finale doesn't hold back. It's got some balls on it, holy moly. Overall, I think The Boys Season 2 went from strength to strength. The story gets more interesting, and the characters especially get more interesting. The villains of Season 1 have moments where they feel like sympathetic human beings, and the good guys of Season 1 have moments where they act like absolute pricks. Because, like I said, everybody is equally screwed up and complicated and messy, and it's just fascinating to watch. So much so that I felt like the season wasn't lacking for much of anything, even though there's really not that much action if you think about it. Mostly it's just story and character stuff. But when the story and the characters are so good, sometimes that's all you need. And I can't wait for Season 3, because with the way this season ends, they seem to have set things up for the show to more closely resemble the comics going forward, and there's a lot of crazy stuff they can pull from the comics if they want to go in that direction. So yeah, Season 2 of The Boys gets a big thumbs up from me. This show is great. It's smart, biting, doesn't pull any punches, the characters are deep and complicated, and it's so wonderfully, unapologetically anti-PC. Like, there were moments this season when I thought to myself, oh, the SJWs are gonna hate this. And I fucking love it. And at the same time, it often does things that feel very progressive, but not in such a way that makes them come off cheesy and lame. Like, remember that scene in Avengers Endgame with all the female heroes? You know the one. The movie was great, but there's that one moment that was like, oh, that's so cringy. What were they thinking? Well, this season has a moment similar to that one. But here, I was glued to my seat going, hell yeah, ladies, tear that bitch apart. Because it's not presented as an exploitative girl power yeah moment. It's just people whose genders don't matter teaming up to fight a villain. And that's why it works. That's why this season works as well as it does. Because while it does comment on a lot of real-life issues, that commentary isn't delivered in the wrong way or for the wrong reasons. It doesn't have an agenda attached to it. In fact, The only people who I think will have a problem with this season are the people who liked that moment at Avengers Endgame. Again, great movie, but that moment was cringe city. So slap on my patented seal of approval and let's wrap this up. The Boys Season 2 is terrific stuff. I had a blast watching it. If you find yourself becoming disillusioned with politics and feminism and SJW tropes seeping into modern superhero shows and movies or just entertainment in general, I think you'll dig the hell out of The Boys because it delights in just throwing all that stuff out in favor of great storytelling, characters that feel like real people, ballsy plot twists. It's a great ride. Go watch it. I do wish they'd stop with the breast milk stuff, though. Seriously. Gross. Guys, tell me what you thought of The Boys Season 2 in the comments. If you like what you see here, ding that bell icon and follow me on social media to always be notified when I upload new stuff. The link is down there. Like the video, share, subscribe. Make sure you're still subscribed, and I'll be back with more very soon. Until then, do all the YouTube things, and I'll see you next time.